morning, everyone. Our students need to learn that planning is the key while picking a career and deciding what you want out of life. Students find it difficult to decide their career as they have woefully inadequate knowledge and limited opportunities to clear their doubts. Today, we have a great opportunity where students will get in touch with professionals and gain more knowledge about their field of interest to make their future more brighter and stronger. I find immense pleasure in introducing our guest, Ms. Shipra Malik, who is pursuing PhD in Pharmaceutical Sciences from University of Connecticut, US. She was one of us scoring 96.4 percentage in class 12 board exam. She was gold medalist in Delhi University. We welcome you, ma'am, and thank you for giving us your valuable time.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for the introduction. Okay, great. So I think she already introduced me a little bit, but I'll just give you a little bit more background about myself, who I am, where I'm from. So I'm Shipra Malik. I am from Delhi, India, and I did my schooling from Delhi. Then I did Bachelor's of Pharmacy from Delhi Institute of Pharmaceutical Sciences and Research with Mayank. He was my batchmate. And then I did my master's from the same college, and my specialization was again pharmaceutics. And after that, I worked a bit in Sun Pharma for like almost, I would say 2 years in regulatory, where I was working on filing new applications to US FDA especially. That was my focus area. And after that, I wanted to do something more with life because just doing a desk job wasn't me. So I needed something more challenging and intellectual to work upon. So I decided to pursue the PhD program, and I applied to a couple of schools, and I think School of Pharmacy turned out very well in terms of the timing and the type of the work that I wanted to do. So I ended up here in the School of Pharmacy, University of Connecticut, USA, and I joined here in 2018. So this is the 3rd year of my PhD program. And I think I'm in the program quite enough to understand what exactly the field is and how research work in the US. And if any of you is interested in pursuing research or any other program in the US, just let me know. I'll be happy to help in any possible way if I can. So basically my research focus, if I have to give you guys a brief background, is that I work on antisense technology. And in antisense technology, I focus upon cancer therapy. And I'll explain a bit before the slides what it is. The other one is gene editing. So there are therapies in the market, small molecules, and then there are certain antibody-based drugs and stuff. But there are several, and I would say myriad of disorders which is caused due to the mutations and which cannot be corrected. There is no therapy as of now which can correct those genetic mutations. So in such disorders, most of the possible option to treat them is to just handle the symptoms by using some drugs or other supportive therapies to increase the life of those patients. So one of the major area of my research is to come up with the molecules which can actually correct those mutations so that even in the next generations, it wouldn't be passed on, and you use this therapy once and then you are done. You don't have to be on a supportive therapy for the rest of your life. And for gene editing, currently I'm actively pursuing one specific mutation, that is sickle cell anemia. So it's a point mutation. There is just like one small change which changes an amino acid from valine into glutamic acid, and that results into the sickle cell anemia. So I'm trying to correct that specific mutation by designing new molecules and also delivery systems to achieve that. Quickly. Okay, so this is my lab. So this is our Department of Pharmaceutical Sciences. This is at Atrium, and this is me. This is my advisor, Dr. Raman Bahal. Dr. Raman Bahal, he was a postdoc at Yale for like 4 or 5 years, and he did some great work in gene editing as well as in antisense therapy. These are my fellow graduate students, and these are some undergrads. So like these are basically pharmacy students, but they come to our lab to pursue research and they learn all the skills. And it helps them a lot in their CV when they're applying for jobs. So like probably pursuing higher education as well. Okay, so when I said antisense technology, that's like one of my major research areas. It basically means you are targeting this messenger RNA over here or any RNA. There are not just messenger RNAs in our body. So we have like DNA, as everybody knows. This is basically the central dogma of molecular biology. All the information is coded in the DNA that undergoes transcription to form mRNA that happens within the nucleus itself. And after that, this mRNA is transported to the cytoplasm, forms the proteins. And whenever there is a mutation, there would be a different sequence of mRNA, and then there would be like a different protein that will be formed. Or in most of the disorder, there are certain proteins which are dysregulated or they have some other issues. So the current therapies, what they usually do is they would come up with a small molecule that would go and bind to that associated protein and then would help with the disorder. However, in case of antisense technology, if you have certain protein which causes tumor, for example, c-Myc protein, it is like highly upregulated in case of different lymphomas, leukemias, or breast cancer. So there are like a lot of those proteins which induces tumor. So rather than you target a protein which is extremely complicated because proteins are huge molecules, the another way to inhibit the production of that protein is that you can also target the messenger RNA. That technology or that platform is called as antisense platform. And another technique is that you can also directly target the DNA. So that would completely inhibit the production of mRNA itself and then further inhibit the protein synthesis. So these are the two different stages. When you target an RNA, that's called an antisense technology. And when you target a DNA, that's called as anti-gene technology. So these are one of the major focus of research area and many of the pharmaceutical companies around the world. So the biggest amount of the money and funding that goes in is in this technology, because small molecules, they help in somehow, but if you have to actually come up with the treatment, you have to have like go to these core region where you have like the actual disorder or this is actually causing the disease. So this is basically what is called as antisense and anti-gene. And what we usually study in 12th or like in our basic school is that you have a DNA that undergoes transcription to RNA, which usually codes for some proteins. This will go out to the cytoplasm, will undergo translation using the ribosomal machinery and will form these proteins. But in addition to that, there are like tons of other different non-coding RNAs, which are like microRNAs, circular, and all of this. This is like a whole new research area. And that has recently come up in like since 2000s or something. And hence there are like several technology drugs which have been developed to target some of these different RNAs, which have wide range of role in cancer, atherosclerosis, kidney disorders, liver disorders, like everything. So you can actually modify their levels in order to come up with a therapeutic strategy. So many of them are in clinical trials. There are certain which are already approved as well. So this is just like a basic idea of what I do. So I focus on one of these areas of targeting these microRNAs, which are upregulated in cancer. And you could also target certain messenger RNAs. That's also one of my projects where I work upon. Using molecules which are called as synthetic nucleic acid analogs. I wouldn't go too much in detail, that would be too much for you guys, but I'm just going to giving you guys an idea of what the research background or what the basic idea for this research is.
Ma'am, it's really good to know about your research work and whatever you have done. It's superb. I have a few questions from you which I would like to ask you. Yeah. My very first question is, what was the eligibility criteria for admission in your university?
I think the eligibility criteria is that you have to have GRE exam. So you need to GRE. It's not necessary to have like a very high score. So I had like 315 out of like 330 or something. So you just need to qualify for it. Every university has a criteria. So if you just fulfill that criteria of like minimum GRE score, that's all you need. And TOEFL, you also need TOEFL score.
TOEFL, yeah.
Yeah, which has to be more than 90 or something to be eligible. That's it.
All right, ma'am. And third question is, how important are class 12 scores to pursue higher studies abroad?
Not really. I would just say when you are studying in high school, try to understand the concepts, because trust me, those concepts will be useful. See, most of these basic concepts, the central dogma of biology and all of this very basic thing, we do study in our high school, right? But as we go through college and all the other sophisticated education system, we tend to forget, and that information or knowledge just slips through our hands. So, but all of that basic knowledge is actually which forms the basis of research in real life, where you're actually developing some therapies. You need that basic knowledge. So what I would suggest is like try to understand whatever knowledge you are learning in your high school. That would be very, very important. And I think the marks are important in India, not in the US. They wouldn't really matter. Nobody will ever ask you. Even in the US or Europe or Australia, wherever you plan to go, nobody will ever ask you how much marks you got in your 12th or like 10. Nobody cares. But the knowledge, if you remember, if you understand, that would help you way more than anything else. But I think marks will be important in India for sure. I would tell you that. In order to get into a college, you need to have like certain cutoffs. And if you're planning to go to DU, then everything is like number based. So you have to have it to survive in India. But once you come out of it, nobody cares.
But the main thing is we should be clear with our concepts, right?
Yeah, that's really important. So try to learn the concepts and not just be worried too much about the marks. And I think if you understand it, if you know it, you'll be fine with the marks as well. There is nothing that's going to be like, oh my God, this just came out of from different planet that doesn't exist.
Okay, so my another question is, why should students look up to research as a possible career option?
I think that's like more of a personal choice. If you like to do research, then I would suggest you should definitely do it. If you are someone in yourself, you know, you like to do something intellectually stimulating, if you want to be actively involved in some work, you just don't want to sit and do some bench work. I had a job, good enough money coming in. I would have promotions every 2-3 years. You'll be a team lead, you'll be a head and all of that bullshit. But at the end of the day, if you're not satisfied with your job and work, then it doesn't really matter. So really comes to a personal choice. And in terms of prospective career opportunities and all that stuff, I would say definitely US, when it comes to research, pays you way higher than any other corporate job that will pay you in India. So research is like what US is basically based upon. So every company has like a very core research area, whether it is engineering, whether it is aerospace, whether it is ecology, whether it is physics. So everything is based on research. So if you plan to come out of India, it's great to do either a master's, which is, you should definitely do it if you can afford it, or directly apply for a PhD program. You don't necessarily have to have a master's. Just do a bachelor's in India and apply for a PhD program. It would be totally fun, so you wouldn't pay out of your pocket. And yeah, and it's great in terms of career opportunities. Like all the people doing the main research and the actual R&D work at Google, Facebook, every other companies, everybody has a PhD.
Right. Okay. So my next question is, how do you think students should prepare themselves for such opportunities?
I think I would always suggest anybody who plans to come out of India for higher education, and I highly recommend to do that. When you come out for higher education out of India, you get a much wider perspective, which you don't get in India at all. We are very much narrowed down in our bachelor's in terms of like, okay, I need to find a job. I just need to get a job and that's all that matters at the end of the day. That is not true. You should think broadly in terms of like your life goals. What would you want to do? Would you be happy with this desk job for the rest of your life? Go ahead and do it. There is nothing wrong in it. If you like it, that's okay with you. You're satisfied, totally fine. If you are not, you want to do something better, contribute more, learn more basically for anything with any field you are, come out of India. And I would say just directly apply for PhD after your bachelor's. Don't wait for anything else. There are many colleges which accept students right after your bachelor's. The only thing you would want to do is in bachelor's, try to be involved in some type of research activity, like because every college will have some master's program or like some sort of research going on, or maybe some other college, some other institute where you could be involved in some sort of activity. Because if you could show or prove that you're interested in doing research in whatever field, doesn't has to be like biology, it could be like engineering, something completely different, astrophysics, whatever. Just try to be involved and prove that you're enthusiastic and you would want to learn about it. And then how you can contribute to whatever lab or whatever program you're applying for in the US. and look out for all possible schools which offer that program you're interested in. And another important thing is that over here, when you come, it's not necessarily restricted that maths people have to do maths. That's not true. If you are a mathematician, you could come here and learn biology, and then you can be a computational biologist. So you do coding, but which is related to biology. So you are trying to come up with a computational model for like how the DNA is coiled, which is like extremely deep. And those type of work is done a lot at Harvard and MIT. So don't restrict yourself to very specific fields. Just learn whatever you like. And then when you come here, you will see how completely different fields overlap with each other and how fascinating and amazing the work gets.
That's true. I'm hearing all these things from you. It's really, creating an enthusiasm in me. Okay, so ma'am, would you like to show any instrument which you use it? We would love to see them.
Oh yeah, these are like very common. There is nothing special about them. Our lab, the type of work we do, it involves chemical synthesis of molecules. So we synthesize them in the lab. Then it involves purification, quality control. Then we formulate nano formulations in order to encapsulate those drugs for delivery purposes. And then we test them in vitro cell culture. Then we move on to the animal models, preclinical models. And I think that's where we stop doing the preclinical studies for our formulation in the drug products. And after that, I think the next goal would be to collaborate with companies and then test them in humans, which would be like the eventual goal. And many universities and colleges actually do that. So we have our collaborator at Harvard, Dr. Frank Slack. He is a founder of one of the companies called Miragen Therapeutics, and they are developing a lot of these RNA-based molecules for like disorders which has no treatment basically. So I think it's a great opportunity. So bringing myself back to the equipments. Yeah, it's just an DLS Sierra sizer, which you can use to measure the size of nanoformulations that we make. This is an HPLC, which is like for chromatography, we basically use this for purification purposes. You can also use for quantification purposes. This is a fancy equipment, which I got to know that exists in the US because it's like really, really fancy in terms of like, you just need 1 microliter of sample to analyze anything that you want. So this is really cool and just saves so much of your time. This is just a plate reader, which you can measure the absorbance of either your compounds or even in the cells. If you're working with some cancer cells, you could measure their viability using this. The next one, oh yeah, this is a PCR machine. So when I talk about the RNAs and DNAs, so we can actually measure the levels of those RNAs. So in this case, for example, I treated it with my test article. And after that, I could see that the level of this RNA is actually reduced. So the reaction that you would use for this is called polymerase chain reaction. So this is a real-time PCR equipment that we use to measure the levels of the RNAs. Then this is just an imager where you see the binding, whatever molecule you design, does it go and bind to your RNA or DNA? So you can image it using this imager. Then we have a Western blot imager. Western blot is basically you measure the level of the proteins. So when you inhibited an RNA, you check whether does the protein level goes down or not. So you can actually do that using the technique called Western blot imaging. And this is an imager, and this is like how you will see the change in the bands. That in this case, the intensity is increased, and in this case, in control, this is normal.
All right, ma'am.
Yeah, this is just a quick, fascinating way that you can see the cells, and it has actually the drug in it. So the great thing is that you get to do all of these things and learn all of these things on your own here. So like you have complete authority and freedom to do and explore as much as you want. I mean, the number of techniques I learned here in 1 year is like way more than I ever did in 24 years of my life.
That's good, ma'am. So, ma'am, another question is, our curious student, Harshita, she wants to ask, is it compulsory to give IELTS exam while going abroad?
Yes, you will have to give either IELTS or TOEFL.
TOEFL.
Yeah, TOEFL or IELTS. I think either of them works. Yeah. Most of the universities, but I think TOEFL is the one which is accepted by most of the universities. Some of them don't accept IELTS at times. So you would need it if you're coming from India. But if you have a master's from the US, like 1 or 2 year program, then it can be waived off. But again, if you're coming from masters, you will need to give that exam. So at some point, if you're coming from India, you will need to give it.
Okay, so ma'am, another student, Jhalak, is asking how much money do we need to survive over there? The living cost. What's the living cost?
Living cost actually changes based on the state you are living. So for example, if I live in Connecticut,
Alright.
it have a very high living cost. But if you are living somewhere in Kansas, if you're living in like North Dakota, South Dakota, the living expenses are like almost nothing. That's very cheap. So it depends on the state where you're living. And I think if you are coming for a PhD program, then you would be provided a stipend. So that stipend will actually cover your living expense. Your tuition would be waived off, and your stipend will depend on the expenses for the state. So it would be accordingly adjusted based on the state. So you will be getting enough to survive definitely. But if you're coming for a master's program, then definitely consider the state you are going in and then the expenses for that specific state, how much it will be. And for the people who will try to get here for a master's, I would suggest that try to get an internship or try to get like an assistantship. Even I think in your second semester or in your second year of your program, you can always find some campus jobs or like some other stuff. There are always assistantships available that you could teach somebody like basic maths or something else, some other undergrads if you're coming here for masters. So that thing really helps in terms of your living expenses. There are many opportunities once you are here. You might not find them when you're looking from India, because many of those opportunities are posted within the campus itself. So like people who are looking for them from outside, they wouldn't know about it. So once you come in, you will know, and then you will find job opportunities or like assistantships and stuff to support you through your program.
All right. Ma'am, what obstacles do we face while going abroad?
I don't think there is any obstacle that you will ever face.
It's like simply I just have to give the exam and then we are there, right?
Yeah. So I would just say you would want to choose where you want to go. But I think the biggest challenge or hurdle is like figuring out where you want to go and having that university accept you. You also need to prove yourself why you are worthy of that position, why they should hire you. If you are going for a funded program, like if the university is funding you for something, then it's very competitive. But if you're paying, it's like a paid program, it's like a master, so it's like a quick MBA or like analytics program or something like that. Those are very quick. I mean, you just give your GRE and you apply for it, you send like a statement of purpose, and if it's a paid program, they will take you very easily, trust me.
All right, ma'am. Thank you so much, ma'am, for giving us your time and helping us to, get some more knowledge about it. We are really thankful to you. And
yeah, that's totally okay. Let me know if you guys ever have any questions. And I would say just keep your options open. Like, don't just stick to maths or biology or something. Just combine something together and do something entirely different. So just...
The outer universities are providing so many opportunities for us to become better, to mold ourselves in better ways, right?
Yeah. So that's the great thing. That's why I would suggest just do your bachelor's in India, because I know doing that in the US is like really crazy expensive. If you can afford it, please do it. But if you cannot, then try to come for a master's or like a PhD. You would really know how things work, and
so
it's a great
option. It is better for students to take a PhD over in abroad rather than taking bachelor's or master's because of the cost of living and cost of the admission, right?
Yeah, master's program would cost like around $30,000 to $40,000, depends on what type of program it is. And in some cases, you could get some assistantship, like you pay for 1 year, and after that, you figure out that somebody is offering you some assistantship, so your 1 year of fee could be waived off. But you have to have a backup for the entire tuition money and your living expenses. You need to have that much of backup, definitely.
I think that's a lot of information for students. I hope this will be useful for them. And thank you, Shubhra, for joining us. And giving us time for your busy schedule.